The Colts pass catchers are finally starting to look like a group of studs in camp, and they have a young, improving playmaker delivering them the ball. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of this evening. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. Hello, everyone. I am Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com. And I'm joined, as always, by Jake Arthur, the boots on the ground, the credentialed member of horseshoehuddle.com. He is there at training camp like he is every single day this offseason, giving us the lowdown of what happened at camp. If you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider just like Jake and chat with us directly and get that inside scoop, follow the link in our show notes. But today, Jake is going to give us the breakdown of everything he saw and heard and just everything at training camp. The Colts practiced this Sunday afternoon. I believe it was from, 4 to 5:30 today, Jake?
Yep.
A lot of 11-on-11, a lot of one-on-one, some really fun stuff. I saw some clips out there on Twitter, so even me in Virginia was able to enjoy it. But Jake, before we get to the fun stuff and talk about our quarterback, Anthony Richardson, there were a couple injuries of note. Braden Smith returned to practice today. That's obviously the best news that we could ever hope for.
Yeah.
But a couple of pass rushers were also held out of practice with calf injuries, one of them got hurt in practice today. So what can you tell us about the status of those two players?
Yeah, so starting with Braden, he was back today, but they're working him in slowly. He only worked with positional stuff today during the 11-on-11s. It was still Blake Freeland at right tackle. Dayo Adengbo was the only player going into the day that was practiced or injured who wasn't on one of the injured lists. After practice, Shane Steichen said he had a calf injury, as does Samson Ebukam, who left one of the sessions of 11-on-11s early. It looked a little more serious maybe than a calf thing, but I mean, you and I talked off air, calf strains can suck and it can hurt no matter what. I mean, if that's what it is, and that's great. And, hopefully it's nothing serious. But yeah, going down two of your better pass rushers, and luckily it doesn't feel like it's the end of the world because, luckily you used that 15th pick on Latu. You still got Kwity Paye. So you hate to not be with those guys for X amount of time, but I mean, shoot, that's what you got depth for.
Yeah, for sure. And also, we got some fisticuffs out there tonight. A little bit of some Sunday night fights. What did you see out there between the Colts' first big fight of training camp?
Yeah, so it's going to be really, really shocking to everybody that Michael Pittman Jr. got the party started. Now, to his credit, he's been good for like a year and a half. I don't think he got in any fights last year, but it popped off, It was during the one-on-ones, and Jalen Jones held him downfield on the target. And I mean, it got penalized, but Pittman really didn't like what happened. So he started jawing, and then it kind of escalated from there. They, locked up. They, started tussling, and I kind of thought they were just messing around until Pittman started throwing haymakers into the midsection. And then, they went to the ground. I think Pitt ripped his helmet off maybe. And then, players and coaches started getting in there to try to separate them. But got to get that first one out of the way. It happened before pads even came on, though, so that's interesting. No padded practices yet, but they're already fighting. I think we've got the wonder of some technical difficulties right now, don't we, Zach?
I think so. I don't know which one of us is cutting out there, but fights happen at training camp. We've seen it with Michael Pittman Jr. in the past, especially during the the mixed practices with other teams. So we'll see
Oh, yeah.
that later in the offseason for sure. Before we run out of time in the first segment, though, we do have to talk about Anthony Richardson because that's the man of the offseason, the one that you guys all tune in to hear about. Looks like he had a good day completing passes today. You have him as 10 of 14 here and completing a good bit of passes. So what can you tell me about Anthony Richardson's day out there at practice?
Yes, it's been a really sharp start for him through these first 3 practices. Was 4 of 5 on Thursday, 4 of 4 on Saturday, and then 10 of 14 today. Completed his first 7 today, until the streak breaker was an interception, a really impressive one by Julian Blackman. But no, what I'm most impressed with is that he's spreading the ball around. Like, these receptions are going to all different guys. He's not just dumping it off either. It's happening in all areas of the field, red zone, middle of the field, everywhere, different receivers. It's just like he's looking very, very polished with it. Now, he, of course, looks better in 11 on 11s than the 7 on 7s, which I've discussed before, but I think that's improving as well. He looks more decisive, and I don't want to say confident. I don't know if it's a confidence thing, but he's just more sure of what he's seeing. Just getting rid of the ball a bit quicker. So, of course, threw his first pick today, but I keep seeing growth from this guy all the time.
Yeah, and interceptions in training camp are at the end of the world. I mean, defenders are paid big money too. I mean, Julian Blackman is one of the Colts' best overall players in the back half of the defense. Obviously, he's going to make some plays out there, and he's been known to be a ball hawk in the NFL. But something that you put of note in here, and what I've seen a little bit on social media, which seems like a big departure from last year, is from last year in training camp, Anthony Richardson, a lot of check downs, a lot of getting it out underneath, just kind of feeling the offense and then dumping it down. It seems like this year he's taking more shots down the field. I mean, you put that note specifically in here, but have you seen a more aggressive Anthony Richardson so far in training camp?
Yeah, without question. I mean, now during one-on-ones and stuff, it's designed to do that, but we're seeing it in 7 on 7s and 11 on 11s. He had a nice connection with Alec Pierce today, getting it to the left boundary while Pierce was sliding towards the sideline. They got that down. He's hit Josh Downs in consecutive days on big plays. He had Pittman on a 40-yard bomb yesterday. During 7 on 7s, he went to DJ Montgomery over the middle of the field for about 25 yards. So that comes with more confidence, more preparedness, and chemistry and trust with the guys you're throwing the ball to. So you're just seeing a lot of really natural progression from him. And you're right. Like, even through this spring, it was a lot of dinks and dunks and just looking like he's trying things out and trying to make his, little progressions through things. But now he's ripping it now.
Yeah, and I thought that was his big issue too, also in the games last year. Like the couple games that he did play outside of that Titans game where he started to be a little bit more aggressive and more decisive, it felt like those first couple games, especially the Jaguars game and in the Texans game. I know the concussion obviously dealt with that in that game too, but you could kind of see, and we talked about this on the podcast, where he was going through his progressions kind of fast in those first couple games. It was starting deep like you're supposed to and then working back down, but it was like boom, 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 boom. Like, I need to keep going through my progressions because that's what the call sheet says. And it wasn't really letting those deeper routes develop and taking advantage of, the deep safety did not, take a step back on this post. I should be waiting for it to open up. Instead, it's, the deep safety's back there. Let me just get my dump off here. So seeing him take that progression, even if it's just camp, and saying, hey, let me let that things develop down the field and rip it down the field, that feels like a big step for Anthony Richardson's development as a passer.
Yeah, and another part of that, another layer to it is he's throwing with some better anticipation now too. Throwing guys open, throwing to a spot early in the read and letting that route runner get to the ball. We're seeing a lot of that stuff as well. So the interception stuff that's going to happen, I don't really view that as a big deal. Shane, even after practice, was like, in the moment, that's where my eyes went to throw that ball to. Julian just made a great play, which I'll get more into that on the defensive side. So we have more defensive players to talk about. But yeah, I mean, that stuff's going to happen. I don't care. Do it in training camp. I love what I'm seeing out here, though.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're not throwing like interceptions on checkdowns in training camp, like if there are interceptions that are happening down the field, All right, whatever. It's training camp.
Yeah.
Get those out. And honestly, I'd rather, like, I think touchdown interception ratio is such an overrated thing anyway. Like, just get the ball down the field,
Yeah.
force the action, move the offense. If you throw some picks, you throw some picks. Andrew Luck was a great quarterback for the Colts. He threw a ton of picks here in
He
Indy.
sure did.
Yeah, it's just part of the game. So I'm perfectly fine with it. Picks happen as long as you're moving the ball down and hitting those explosive plays. That's all that matters. But don't worry, guys. We're going to still talk about the rest of this offense around Anthony Richardson coming up in our next segment. But first, Locked On Everydayers, I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And are you guys watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel is programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels. That part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers, we are here talking Colts training camp. Our boots on the ground, Jake Arthur, was there on this Sunday evening practice, watching everything unfold. A little bit of a longer practice, right? 4 to 5:30, not too bad out there, getting some things going in the 11-on-11s. What can you tell me about this Colts offense aside from Anthony Richardson? Who really stood out to you so far?
Yeah, so the biggest theme so far was yesterday practice was really sloppy. Some pre-snap penalties. Just guys not being in the right spots. There was a couple like bad snaps. It just was really sloppy. Like even just like drops in routes on air yesterday. Like it really started from the beginning. They were determined to get all that stuff corrected and come out here a lot crisper. And that was the case. I didn't really come away with many things where I thought it was too messy. But they were really aggressive through the air. It wasn't just Anthony. There was big plays pretty much everywhere. Even in the one-on-ones, they take those downfield shots, but they were coming up clean on them. Flacco had a couple connections. I think Sam had a couple as well. I'd say Anthony Gould is a thing. Like it wasn't just with Joe Flacco yesterday. Like I think Sam hit him on something yesterday. Like Anthony Gould is not just going to be the gadget player that we thought he might be. He's going to be pretty involved downfield because like I've seen him be targeted downfield a bunch since like OTAs and everything. I think I've only seen one incompletion, no matter who's thrown him the ball. So he is coming up really well. DJ Montgomery seems like a guy who is like not going to go quietly into the night. He's probably at minimum a practice squad guy. I think they really like him. He'll just probably be a victim to the numbers game. But in terms of receivers, Pitt was Pitt as always. I was really impressed with Josh Downs and A.D. Mitchell in this one. Mitchell had his biggest day so far. He had, if it wasn't for Ashton Dulin, he would have had the catch of camp so far. In the one-on-ones, Anthony hit him on a deep shot down the right sideline for about 40 yards, and it was Dallas Flowers in coverage, and they were kind of battling for it. And as AD was falling to the ground, he caught the ball. His helmet popped off. The crowd roared. He got super psyched and ran over the crowd and was like pumping everybody up. So that was one that kind of injected a lot of energy onto the field. But the Dulin one, I got to mention that because that was the play of camp. And I know you talk about Dulin making the routine look difficult, as you like to joke.
Always.
But this one was wild. So it was against Darrell Baker Jr. Same setup. It was during the one-on-ones, running the deep go route down the right side. He climbs Baker like a ladder and straddles him like he's a cowboy and brings the ball in as they're falling to the ground. And it was beautiful. The biggest part about that is, of course, Ashton hasn't been able to do that for a year. He had the ACL injury this time last year, and this kind of stuff we saw him doing before he got hurt. So you love to see it.
Yeah, it feels like, again, we talked about this all off season, and it's not us being hyperbolic to hype up the Colts, because you guys know us. We like to be generally
We'll kill
realistic
them
when it comes to the
when
Colts.
stuff sucks. Like
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
be honest about it.
We covered the Jeff Saturday era of Indianapolis Colts football, and we mean the coaching Jeff Saturday era of Indianapolis Colts football. So you guys know how we are, but we said multiple times this offseason that this receiving group, and I know it's not the biggest thing to compare it to, is by far and away the most talented top to bottom that Chris Ballard has built in Indy. Because we're not talking like if Alec Pierce is your wide receiver 4, that's really strong. If Ashton Dulin is your wide receiver 6, like that's a productive player. If Anthony Gould is coming in and giving you some good snaps, and I'm glad that you mentioned his downfield ability, because again, I still think he can be that like Quez Watkins type player in Shane Steichen's offense. And then you're obviously looking at A.D. Mitchell. You're looking at Josh Downs, Michael Pittman Jr. Like, this is a good wide receiver room. And I know they're not competing against all pro cornerbacks out there, but they can perform their roles pretty well out there. I don't think this is like an elite wide receiver group, but I think it's by far and away the best we've seen in Indy in a long time. And they have a lot of guys who can produce. I mean, with Downs and Pittman, you have 2 guys who could be 1,000-yard wide receivers, and Mitchell maybe one day as well. Like, I'm not saying they're all going to be that at the same time, but Mitchell obviously has that potential. And then Pierce is a solid player too. Like, I think this wide receiver room is pretty underrated compared to like where people are viewing it league wide. And I think it's a really solid just group of players.
Yeah, and I think health permitted, you can throw the tight ends in there as well as pass catching weapons, because everyone's been healthy so far, knock on all the wood. But I mean, Will Mallory's made some really impressive catches. Like, he'll catch the ball that, a ball that's behind him and he's falling, and it literally just looks like it got sucked into the matrix. Like it just, he catches everything just like we knew, but making the difficult ones too. Like, it's great to catch all the routine stuff. Ogletree's making things look very everything just looks smooth and natural with him. Kylan Granson, of course, had like a 40-yard catch yesterday. So, I mean, everyone's doing their part. Everyone looks like they're getting at least a little better. And I mean, we know tight ends can be just as valuable as the receivers, but this is, I think, hands down. I mean, it's early in camp, but we know the potential of all these guys, but the fact that they're starting to look like the part a little bit, I think it's the deepest group of pass catchers they've had.
Yeah, for sure. And I did want to ask you, are the pads come on yet, or are we good to talk about the offensive line, or the pads still off right now?
No, that's Tuesday that they'll come on. I think it's, and the collective bargaining agreement rules, they have to get through a few of them first. But they had their last, shorts and shirts today. Some of them had, the leg pads on, I think. But then off tomorrow, Tuesday, they'll go full pads.
Okay, so we don't really need to talk about the offensive line too much now, because again, what you're getting in those sessions right now without pads on is really just kind of nothing. So I do want to fill the last bit of this offensive segment, though, on a player who I've seen so many good things about. I know that you've talked about him and singled him out a little bit, but just want to hyper focus on him real quick. Josh Downs. It seems like he's having a pretty good camp. That chemistry that we saw with him and Anthony Richardson in the couple games that Richardson played last year seems to be carrying over to this training camp. And I know this is a player that we were hyping up all offseason. I was saying he goes for 1,000 yards this year. What are your thoughts on Josh Downs so far in training camp?
Watching Downs it feels almost like the NFL version of watching an Allen Iverson mixtape. Like, how smooth and seamless everything looks, and he can cut on a dime. He's getting a lot of work done downfield as well. He's made 2 or 3 catches that have been at least 20, 25 yards. But how smooth he is wild. He's able to catch a ball and already be making his move to make the defender miss, while he's catching. It's his body moves different than everybody else's. I don't know. He's catching everything. He's working every area of the field. He has aced everything. This has been a perfect camp. I mean, again, it's 3 practices, but it's the first quarter of training camp, and he's looked awesome.
Yeah, he is the type of receiver where everything looks like a Senior Bowl rep, a Senior Bowl one-on-one rep, where he's doing all these crazy routes, and it's like, oh, that'll never work in an NFL game. And then we see a whole season of it actually working in NFL games. And it's like, well, maybe it will work in an NFL game. And luckily, he's in an offense where Shane Steichen gives him the freedom and the liberty to do those things that he does. Hey, you're running this option route. You can break out, you can break in, you can break vertical, do whatever the heck you need to do to get open in there. And he will. He will do it, and he'll be successful.
I asked Downs about that yesterday. The importance of him and Anthony like studying and being prepared ahead of time for those option routes and being inside each other's heads and knowing what they're going to do. That is something they work on a lot. And to see how good Josh is doing, just go to Kenny Moore's Twitter. That's the guy who faces him the most. Very big fan right there. Those two, that's a really, really fun battle to watch.
Yeah, certainly something to watch at all training camp. And speaking of Kenny Moore, we're going to transition over to defense now. The defense, they made some plays out there, so it's time to give them some love in our final segment on today's show. But first, guys, baseball season is in full swing, and I know there's no team out in Indianapolis outside of the minor league team, but you guys, you travel out to Cincinnati, travel to Chicago. For me, I'm traveling to Washington to see my below 500 Nationals lose some games. It's a great time. We love baseball, and the best place to get your baseball tickets is Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets easier and faster. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to that first pitch. You guys get some really cool things with Gametime, like last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, comedy, theater, whatever is near you. You get the zone deals. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats in that section. And you get the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Also, you get the Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. I know it's great for all of you guys with kids because, look, kids happen. Jake knows, he's nodding over there. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Locked On Colts everydayers. We are back covering training camp. Jake Arthur, our boots on the ground, was out there again today, making sure to keep an eye on everything that's happening. He is our eyes in the sky, eyes on the ground, eyes everywhere there on training camp. And we already talked about the injuries on defense, so that's the harsh reality of the world taken out of that there. But we do have to talk more about Julian Blackman's interception now from the defensive perspective, because now we're all in love with the defensive interception. We got it out of the way in the Anthony Richardson segment saying, oh, man, interceptions happen. But Julian Blackman making the first big play of training camp for the defense, pretty great sign for one of the few playmakers the Colts have in the secondary.
Yeah, really special play by him. And he did, like, if I would have seen this on his college film, like, he would have been my safety one, because I fall in love with the type of stuff he did today. So, obviously as a strong safety, he's closer to the line of scrimmage. He's in the box. He noticed there was no route runner in the area he was supposed to be checking out. He looked and read Anthony Richardson and saw that he was eyeing Josh over the middle, backpedaled, sprinted back towards the middle of the field. Anthony had already let it go, and boom, he was right there to make the play. And, Shane Steichen afterward talked about like how he thinks he's going to have a huge year. That makes probably like 5 or 6 people we've talked to say that Julian's going to have a huge year. So I think everyone's really excited about him. He's just kind of like Kenny Moore. They're a step ahead of the average player. They have special playmaking ability, not only because they're athletic and all that good stuff, but they're smart. They're smarter than a lot of the guys they're going up against. And so for his high football IQ and just his instincts and stuff like that, that's just huge. It's going to be we talked about our 5 most critical Colts players. You had Julian up there. I mean, I wanted to have him up there too, but it's because of you can't afford to lose that. You don't have much else. But his playmaking ability is enormous for a team after Shaquille Leonard really kind of struggled to create turnovers. But no, he made a really big play. He really downplayed it. I mean, I talked to Ron Miles, Joel Erickson, and I talked to Ron Miles after practice, and we relayed some of that information, and he downplayed it. I was like, dude, like you can talk yourself up a little bit. But no, that's Miles's quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, what Julian can do, that's going to be really big. And Julian is very routinely a summer star. Like, I don't think he's ever had a bad training camp.
Yeah, and I think something to really make note of too with Julian Blackman. I know this is his third year in the Gus Bradley system, but it's his second year in at strong safety. Because that first year he was at free safety, but did some nickel stuff. He missed a lot of time with injury. But last year he made the transition to strong safety, and it was a really great transition for him. But something that we've seen with Gus Bradley and we've seen just with this system is it's a very difficult system for secondary players to get a hold of. So you really see that second year in place where players take more of a jump. We saw it with Kenny Moore last year. His second year in nickel in the Gus Bradley system, he looked like Kenny Moore again. And I'm not saying Julian Blackman didn't look like Julian Blackman last year, but I'm thinking that there could be another step in his game with a full year under his belt playing strong safety, being more used to the box, being more used to reading routes from that linebacker, like hybrid linebacker type spot, that robber type spot. I think we could see a pretty big jump from him in terms of how he breaks off routes, how he goes from covering grass to matching routes and just doing some really good things there. So yeah, Julian Blackman is so vital to this defense this next season. It's actually insane. And hopefully he can finish his first NFL season playing all 17 games. But you mentioned Ron Miles. That's one of my guys. Obviously the guy that when I was out there training camp last year, I talked to him for 20, 30 minutes off camera.
He was impressed. He was impressed by you, I'll say.
Yeah, that's my dude right there. But you mentioned him. Let's talk about the competition at the other safety spot. We talked about strong safety. What about free safety? What did Ron Miles have to say about free safety? Does he feel good about the position? What's his overall thoughts on that spot right now?
Well, I don't think he really gave away his temperature on the position, but Gus Bradley told us recently. I asked him, what is the X factor you're looking for? Because obviously you've got athletic, talented guys there, but that's not, if that's what it took, they would already be the starter essentially. But he said, consistency and really the guys in front of them trusting what's going on behind them with that free safety. We obviously saw that communication was a big issue last year, which led to an uncharacteristic amount of big plays allowed. And I kind of took that question to Coach Miles as well. And he preached consistency day after day, because it's like you are getting flashes of each of these guys. We've seen flashes from Nick Cross has made big plays. Ronnie Harrison has, more so at linebacker. Rodney Thomas led the Colts in interceptions as a rookie. But you can't just have 2 strong days at practice and then you get cooked and it's like your head isn't in it and you're not communicating well. That's why they're so reliant on veterans, is because the veterans do everything the right way every single day. And it seems like coach speak, and to an extent it is, but like whoever is going to be the most capable and responsible player, I think, is going to be the one that wins it out. It may not be the sexiest player. I think we all would like it to be Nick Cross. But if Ronnie Harrison is the one giving up the fewest big plays or communicating better with Julian and the corners, it's going to be whoever is the most trustworthy player. Talent and athleticism is not going to be a factor, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of this too, because I can't name many times where the secondary where guys were getting flat out beat. Like for instance, that week 18 game against the Texans where it looks like Brents is getting straight up beat by Nico Collins, but that was supposed to be quarters coverage. There was supposed to be a safety over the top. You look at all those plays against the Saints where they're just all coverage.
Perfect example of what they're talking about.
Yeah, like all the coverage blowns against the Saints, all the wide open touchdowns. Outside of Darrell Baker Jr. occasionally losing at the catch point, it feels like none of these guys were getting actual beat at the catch point. Juju Brents wasn't getting beat at the catch point last year, but anytime they scored a touchdown on him, it was a blown coverage. So I'm full agreement with what you said there. Real quick before we get out of here, though, Jake, anything else stand out about the defense? Any players really catch your eye on day 3 of practice?
Latu's just different. Like, okay, so we want to see more of Latu, of course. The Colts kind of had to decide things on the go today as Ebukam went out with his calf injury. Tyquan Lewis is who stepped up and replaced him, which of course we've talked about him recently having an incredible win rate with his pass rushes. But I don't know how long Ebukam is going to be out. If he is, we'll probably see more of Latu, probably see more of Tyquan as well. But God, Latu's fun to watch, dude. Only thing is I need to ask him if he's going to plan on putting gloves on at some point, because so far through camp, he has been anti-glove, and that can be really hard for me to come to terms with.
See, I actually love the players without the gloves. It reminds me of when I was in high school, the gloves became a big thing for everyone to wear, and I was the only one in the wide receiver room not wearing gloves because I just didn't like them.
Zach with absolutely zero drip on the field.
Dude, look at me. Look at me. I'm a balding white guy in my late 20s. Of course, I have zero drip. But that's all we have for today, guys. We'll be back with you tomorrow to kind of wrap up these first 3 days of camp, or the first quarter of camp. Maybe we'll have a surprise guest on here as well. We'll see. We're gonna hit those phone lines. But if we're not back tomorrow or something happens Tuesday, we have full padded practice, and we'll just talk all offensive line and defensive line because that's what I've been waiting for. Look, you guys love the flashy. I love the big boys up in the middle. That's my favorite right there. We'll be talking about them obviously on Tuesday, all Tuesday episodes. So make sure you guys are subbed to the channel and you guys are watching out for Locked On Colts content. Before we get out of here, though, I do want to remind you guys that Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider like Jake Arthur here, and chat with us directly and get that inside scoop, follow the link in our show notes. If you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love you guys, raise reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.